Welcome everybody one more time to another episode here on the Sit Rep Podcast. I am your host, Oriskany Jim, and what we're looking at today is a monster game of Battle Group in 15mm. Battle Group is a great World War II miniature system, originally published by Iron Fist Publishing. I think now it's been picked up by Plastic Soldier Company. And what we wanted to do in today's game, held at Das Krieg House for the South Florida Miniatures Gaming Club, was a look at one of my favorite parts of the Battle of the Bulge. You looked at this recently in Panzerleader. Now we're doing it in actual physical miniature tabletop. The Battle of Selis. So this is near the very tip of the German Bulge. Of course, everyone knows about the German counterattack in the Ardennes Forest in December 1944. It pushes into the Allied, mostly into the American line, in the Ardennes Forest in southern Belgium, a little bit of northern Luxembourg, and that's where we wind up with that infamous bulge that we all know about. As that bulge continues to develop and it's heading toward the Meuse River, it almost reaches the Meuse River, and at the very tip near a Belgian village called Selis, we have German 2nd Panzer Division gets counterattacked from the north by elements of Combat Command B of the United States 2nd Armored, that's the Hell on Wheels 2nd Armored Division, while they're also being attacked straight out of the west by elements of 29th Armored Brigade, British 11th Armored Division. So we wound up with a 5-player game, way bigger than I was planning for. Hey, let's see what happens. Okay, so we had 2 players for the Germans, that is Steve and Ron. Pretty much they had the same basic force. One had Panthers, one had Mark IVs. They both had 2 Stugs, a bunch of Grenadier infantry. And they were pretty much on defense. They started off with all their forces in what Battle Group calls reaction fire, while 2 American players, that is Mark and Tom, come in from the north side of the board, again CCB of 2nd Armored Division. And meanwhile, John Sowerby was playing lead elements of 29th Armored Brigade, 11th Armored Division, the British, coming on from the west. So as the first tanks come on the table, we start shooting at each other. So as the first American tanks hit the northern edge of the table, we saw them taking fire from the Germans. We've got some German counterattack coming in from further to the east. Meanwhile, we've got British coming in from the west. Now they're crossing over this little bridge here. That is, again, the table's a little compressed. It's not really to scale, but they're basically crossing the Meuse River here, and they're engaging some Germans at the far western end of the table. Here we have some of Tom's American tanks. Again, that's going to be part of CCV 2nd Armored Division. This game was originally designed for 2 players, an Allied player and an Axis player. I said, okay, if we wind up with 3 players, I can split the Americans and the British, and we can have a nice little fun game that way. I got here on the day of the game and found out I had 6 players. One eventually dropped out, so I wound up with 5. So the game got much bigger than I originally designed it for. So there seems to be a lot of tanks on here. We're not tracking ammunition load. We're not even really tracking command points. This is Battle Group Light, because this game got much larger than was originally planned. We wound up with 5 players instead of 2. And upwards of 50 tanks on the table, 50 armored fighting vehicles. If you include other vehicles, maybe up to 60. Okay, so one of the things that happens in Battle Group is when you start to take damage, or you get out-scouted, or you get hit by an airstrike, or you get hit by flamethrowing units. Basically, when something bad happens to your side, you have to blind draw one of those battle rating tokens that we were just taking a look at. And that determines whether or not you take anywhere from 1 to 5 damage, so to speak, against your battle group's overall command rating. And when you hit your threshold, your breakpoint, that's pretty much the end of the game. There are consolation prizes in there. So you saw before where we saw an airstrike counter. The Americans will be drawing an airstrike later on in the game. Meanwhile, we've got some close range combat here. We've got some saves coming in. Looks like there's a little bit of an infantry battle there. Yeah, so there's the remains of an American infantry squad that has engaged grenadiers in those woods. The Americans are coming out ahead on this, but it's costing them plenty. All right, so now the bulk of Combat Command B, or at least our part of it here, has now appeared. That Stug is giving them a problem. That Stug is now pinned down. His buddy has come up to help him. They've got cover in those trees. It's a close range duel between two Stugs and a whole bunch of American tanks, starting off with Stuarts, then Shermans, and then Easy 8 Shermans. So the Stuarts lasted a lot longer than I thought they would, because the Germans kept having trouble with observation checks. But then once the American Shermans really started to pile on the board there, I know we got a little bit of a Team Yankee style parking lot there. Again, this game grew out of my originally planned proportions, but we all had a great time, so it was definitely fun. Yeah, so some American tanks are definitely on fire. They're definitely burning. There's more of them, though, and the Americans have a higher threshold. Alrighty, so here we've got double sixes, which is going to be some hits against some two German units. You see there where Steve is drawing counters. And every time you lose a unit in this game, you have to draw one of those battle rating counters, and that indicates how much command discohesion, or whatever the word is, that you suffer against your battle group. Once your battle group hits your breakpoint or your threshold, that's the end of the game. The thing is, those draws are secret, so your opponent can always tell how many counters you've drawn, but it doesn't know what those values are. Again, it goes from 1 to 5. So this is one of those great games where you never really know how close you are to winning or losing. So the big battle is taking place between Steve and Mark, the Americans and the Germans over there. Here we've got John's force, again the British, coming on the extreme western end of the table, against the very, very tip of the bulge. They're actually crossing the Meuse River. And what those Stugs were doing on that hill there, what Steve was trying to do with his Stugs there, was to hold on that he's outnumbered like 8-1 over there. He's trying to hold up that huge tide of American olive drab armor there until his Panthers can get into position. It takes an extra turn or two, but let me tell you something. Once those Panthers get into position, we also see some 88s there in entrenched positions on those crossroads. It's very fitting that the Americans chose to come on in a graveyard, because at least they won't have far to go, because they start taking hideous losses. John, meanwhile, is having a little bit of an easier time moving against Ron, because Ron is basically fighting two players. Ron is fighting John's British and also Tom's Americans. So the Americans are coming in from the north. That's the other half of CCB's 2nd Armor. Meanwhile, John's coming in from the west with pretty much all of 29th, or at least in our game, all of 29th Armored, 11th British Armored Division. So, yeah, he's definitely got... Ron's definitely got the short end of the stick there. They're hoping to buy time for those Panthers to make a difference. Alright, so we've got Mark IVs in rubble and tucked behind buildings. They are shooting and engaging some British armor that's coming in from the west and American armor coming in from the north. You see that P-47 Thunderbolt there? It took out a Stug with rockets. Later on, it'll fire its last rockets against a Panther and miss. Those 88s are definitely deployed in the anti-tank role. I know 88s were anti-aircraft guns, but against these kind of planes, that's not what they were for. To compensate for that, we do have the Germans, both German players, each have one quad 2-centimeter anti-aircraft position, and that has definitely done some damage to that Thunderbolt. Okay, here's a great overhead shot looking from north to south against Steve's Panthers. Mark V Panthers coming in from the left and hitting Mark's Sherman Fireflies. He's got some 105 Assault Shermans, the Angels of Death. And yeah, a lot of those Shermans are definitely burning. Here we've got some of Tom's armor, the balance of, again, Combat Command B, 66th Armored Regiment, 2nd U.S. Armored Division. He's doing a lot better because he's further away. He's not engaged with any of Steve's heavier, scarier Panther tanks. He's fighting Ron's Mark IVs, and he's got a whole British force helping him. So again, Ron is kind of outnumbered here, 2 players to 1, while Steve hopefully cracks through Mark with all of those Panthers. So we saw some Churchills on the bridge. We saw Cromwell already brewed up as I came across the bridge. That's technically the Meuse River there. Again, this map's not really to scale. And we see a lot more British armor here. We have both vanilla Sherman, so to speak, and some Fireflies. Now, I do apologize that my vanilla British Shermans are in, western desert, sort of El Alamein markings. Sprinkle some flour on top of them, like we have here on some of our map, and it looks like snow. So again, those Mark IVs are still holding on. They're definitely in a losing battle. Now, what's going to happen here is the Americans are going to run into a couple of things. Number one, 88s in those positions, those quad 20s, you see one there in that ruined building, and German infantry, which is well equipped with Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck anti-tank weapons. So there's going to be a lot more burning American armor before we're done. Okay, the American Shermans fighting for Mark are still grimly holding on. You see that 6 there. That's one of the upgunned 76mm L53 armed Shermans has just scored a hit against one of these Panthers coming up over the other side of the hill there. You see one of them's already smoking. But I don't know if he has penetrated or not. I'll have to look that up. So what you roll is you roll to observe, you roll to hit, and then you try to roll to penetrate. So he's trying to get through the frontal armor of the Panther. He's got to get through H armor, and what you're going for there's a chart in Battle Group that cross-references what your penetration is at the range at which you scored the hit. You find that number versus the letter of armor on the target that you just hit, and then that number that you find listed there is what you have to beat on 2d6. So that Panther is not having smoke put on it, so it looks like he survived. Alrighty, so meanwhile we've got some Stugs that are immobilized, lots of Panthers are burning, so it's turning into a bit of a mess there. That looks like a much better roll there for the Americans. Jen's giving us the thumbs up. So that's going to be that Panther knocked out after all. Okay, back over here to the British side of the table, we see John trying to get a little bit more heavily invested against what's left of Ron's tanks. There really aren't a lot. Fortunately for Ron, because again, he's sort of outmatched here. He is doing well. He is fighting back quite hard. He's going to knock out, for sure, some of these lighter Shermans. I don't think he gets any Fireflies. What's really going to wind up happening is when Tom's American Shermans get too close, and the German players sort of realize how powerful their infantry is, especially when it's fortified in buildings with Panzerschrecks and Panzerfausts. Then things start to get really nasty. Alright, so we're back here on Tom's part of the table. And it looks like he is trying to dig that quad 20mm out of that ruined building. He definitely did take a heck of a shot at some of Tom's command vehicles and almost blew up one of his Jeeps. So it's 4 autocannon. It's a very deadly weapon system against soft targets. Even light armor targets it does very well. So this has sort of become Tom's new priority there to knock the center out of Ron's position. He's got plenty of firepower to do it, but again, every time he takes a loss, he draws another battle rating token. So he's got to be careful not to take too much damage. Alright, so we are looking from south to north, where Ron is trying to shoot back with what he's got left. He's really badly outnumbered at this point. Most of his, you see his 2 Stugs that are already burning. I believe one of them was knocked out in a P-47 airstrike, carrying fighter truck. And now we've got 3 vanilla Shermans, we've got an upgun 76 Sherman, plus everything that John's bringing in from that road there out of the northwest. So that first tank in front, that's a Cromwell. Very, very lightly armored. It's got a good 6-pound gun on it, but a very, very lightly armored, very, very fast battle tank. So it can cover a lot of ground and get in your face before you know it. Okay, so here is one of the 88s. I think that was Steve's 88. They put enough machine gun fire on there to smoke the crew, so that gun is pretty much out of gas. We saw the other 88 in position there at that crossroads. That's Ron's 88. Meanwhile, this bloody hill, man, good grief, it's still going on. So we've got 2 remaining Panthers here still engaged with what's left of Mark's Shermans. There's not a lot left. You see a low ammo counter there that has been played against one of his infantry teams. So the German player, what happens there is the German player lost a unit, he reaches in to blind draw a battle rating counter, and instead of a number from 1 to 5, denoting further cohesion damage, degradation to his battle rating threshold, so to speak, he draws a different counter that's got some sort of positive effect as opposed to a negative effect. He plays it against the unit, we roll a dice, and we see what happens. So, long story short, Mark is finally starting to wither here, until he draws a Beyond the Call of Duty counter, because of course he does. Okay, so Beyond the Call of Duty, this is one of my favorite rules in Battle Group. It's a great consolation prize. You lose a unit, of course you have to reach into that blind draw bag and you pull out a counter, and you're hoping not to get a number, you're hoping to get something here with text on it. Beyond the Call of Duty means that one of your units just has a Silver Star day or a Military Cross day. You just get a free turn. So that he obviously is going to pick one of his more powerful units. He is going to see if he can get through. He's now scored a hit on a Panther. He's going to see if he can score a hit on a Panther. He scored a hit on the Panther. He's going to see if he can punch through the let me find it here. Okay, so at this range, his gun has a penetration of 9. We keep going until we find the letter. Remember we said it was an H. So you see there what I was mentioning before. He's got to beat a 7 on 2d6. Okay, he barely got it. So if you tie the number, the target is immobilized. If you beat the number, it explodes. All right, John is sort of trying to get through his own field fortifications there and get across that bridge and develop his attack out of the west against... I'm almost starting to feel sorry for him because he is, literally getting a bit of a handicap match here. You see where pretty much all of his vehicles are now burning. His quad 20mm is still standing tall. This is Ron, the other German player. And all of his vehicles are burning. And there's still more British armor just piling up on him. Those Cromwells are so friggin'... Sorry, not Cromwells. Those Churchills are so friggin' slow that he's having a tough time getting to them. Meanwhile, Tom continues to pour machine gun and HE fire into these buildings. You see some infantry there in that ruined building. That's Steve's infantry squad. With Panzerfaust, Panzerschrecks. They are taking a grim harvest on American armor. 66th Armored Regiment, Combat Command B, not having a good day. Alright, so as John's British tanks continue to get closer, where he has taken a few shots with the 88, this is Ron. He's got the only 88 left. It's way down off the table, but 88's range at this scale is pretty much unlimited. At the same time, he either keeps missing, or when he does get a hit, he gets a very bad roll, which means like a glancing hit off of the Sherman's armor. So it's not often that a Sherman can survive a hit from an 88, but once in a while, just gets lucky with a glancing shot. This infantry battle is still going hot and heavy here. You see where more and more stuff is piling up against that church as the two sides of the American force are trying to get a little closer. So this was one of Mark's infantry teams, which has the low ammo counter plate on it. It has a bazooka and it has a lot of small arms, obviously. It has already fired its last bazooka shell because it's got low ammo on it now. And it's now firing its last small arms ammunition. Because another German squad of grenadiers has joined the battle on this hilltop. And then we get a mine strike. You may have seen it there at the very beginning of this section. The German player lost another unit, drew out of the battle rating counter bag, came up with a lucky draw. It was a mine strike. Even with that lucky draw, though, he didn't get a good enough hit. Basically, one of the more powerful American Shermans ran over the mine, and it did no damage. So even when the Germans get lucky, they're not getting lucky. Sometimes it just comes down to the draw of the counters and the roll of the dice. Okay, so here we are seeing, again, at that church and in that ruined building, that's sort of the join between Tom's Americans and Mark's Americans. You see where Mark's Americans are getting a little bold now. They're charging across the village square. He wants that quad 20 in a big way. It's not really going to go that well for him. He'll eventually clean out the crew. That's some of John's tanks trying to put some HE on that remaining German 88 down there. So now we're down to, at least against Ron's part of the German side of the battlefield. Again, most of the armor is already cleared out. Now we're just trying to take out guns and infantry. The Americans get a little too close, I'm not going to lie. So a better move for the Americans here might have been to stand back and try and take out some of the guns, but by advancing too quickly, you see there where John's also getting pretty close with his British armor coming in out of the west. We're looking from north to south right now. So what winds up happening is you wind up fighting German infantry and artillery at the same time, which is not great. Okay, here we see one of John's advanced Shermans finally take at least an immobilization hit from that German 88. the Germans didn't do anything wrong on this side of the table. They were just overmatched, and they got some pretty bad die rolls. But British tanks are finally starting to close in. You see that fire marker we just put on the Quad 20. The Quad 20 has finally been knocked down, and now the Americans are going to start a rush across that yard. Problem is, they're going to run into some Panzerschrecks and Panzerfausts. Meanwhile, as far as the British go, I shouldn't make it sound like they've gotten away completely unscathed. They've lost a couple Cromwells. They have definitely lost a couple of vanilla Shermans. They just didn't lose any Fireflies, and they definitely didn't lose any Churchills. Those things are just thick-skinned. Also, it took the Churchills pretty much the entire game, because they're so damn slow, to even get into the battle. So the Germans almost didn't get a chance to hit them very hard. Meanwhile, a mechanical breakdown took place on that last Panther. Again, the Germans are continually dogged by bad luck, whereas the American Sherman survived that mine strike. When the Americans pulled a chit and put it on mechanical breakdown, they roll a 6. So the Germans roll 1s, the Americans are rolling 6s, and that mechanical failure usually breaks the tank down and mobilizes it. This actually catches the fuel on fire and blows up. Sadly appropriate for a Panther. Alright guys, this is where we pretty much called the game and wrapped it up as an Allied victory. Again, it's not about taking objectives or tabling the enemy or anything like that. You can have physical objectives in a battle group game. There are rules for that, don't get me wrong. But really it's about breaking the enemy's battle group threshold or his battle rating threshold. So that's one of the great things about this game. You can pull, every time you lose a unit, you have to draw a counter, and same with the opponent. You know how close you are to losing your battle cohesion, to having your battle group either fall apart, or you take too many losses and your colonel or your brigadier general calls you up on the radio and says you had your shot, you missed, break off the engagement now. The bad news is you never know how close the enemy really is to being damaged. You can count how many battle rating counters he's drawn. Those are displayed face down on the table, however. You don't know the values on those counters. It can be anywhere from 1 to 5 per counter. So you never really know how badly hurt your opponent is. Meanwhile, you know damn well how well you're hit. You hear screaming on the radio, people crying out for stretcher bearers. All you see of the enemy is a flash of fire, once in a while some smoke, maybe a shape running through the battle smoke. You really don't know how badly hurt your opponent is. So sometimes there's a definite tension to the game, and it can be a little stressful. All right, so again, we're going to go ahead and call it. The score wound up being 70 to, I think it was 55. Congrats to everyone on a great game. The Germans didn't really do anything wrong. They just got some really, really bad luck. Meanwhile, thanks everybody for watching. Tango Mike as always, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thanks again, and take care.